welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm dying.
Oh, well, welcome back to the last episode of Beating a Dead Horse, where I am your host, Sean McKinda, and we're not going to have another episode, apparently.
Yeah. You know, I'm sorry this is coming out late, gang. It's all my fault.
As always.
I mean, it does tend to be. I'm not going to dispute that.
You know, I was actually just trying to make like a light joke, but like the past, I'm not here to point fingers, but
I've been pretty fucking sick. I had a real hard time even doing my day job, even teaching, because I could barely talk. I'm on the tail end of it now, I think, but I'm still Guigiing every morning, which Sean specifically told me I could make the world a better place by never using Guigi as a verb again, and now I'm inflicting it upon all of you just to spite him, just because he told me not to.
The problem is that now this is a thing that this went from a thing that was between you and I and could have been self-contained and never, broken out of its two-person holding cell, but is now part of this episode, which will be on the internet forever. So even, our small audience, if 10 years down the road, someone might unfortunately stumble upon this episode and be forced to revisit Guigiing, a phrase that you have not explained at all and just dropped on our listeners' laps and said, this is a verb now.
Well, I mean, considering I've said that I've been sick and that I've been coughing a lot, I think they could put two and two together.
I'm afraid that there's some other ways Guigiing could go, my friends.
True, though. I didn't even think about that.
We're talking about No Country for Old Men, in case you couldn't tell. That should have been clear from the intro, right? Like that. I think we were doing a really good job of leading up to this.
I mean, it's their fault for not listening to last week's episode, where I did a really great, relevant bit where I talked in a cowboy voice to hype us up for this fucking movie. So no intro is necessary. Here we are. We're here now. Sean, what did you think of No Country for Old Men? But first, maybe we should give a shout out to who recommended this.
I was going to say, this is our last episode of our recommendation month. Next episode will be coming out in February, which means that we're going to start doing things that we want to do again, not what you want to do, because we are self-contained podcast men. But for what we have here, we put a call out to action on the Discord, on Twitter, on Facebook for suggestions. We threw them all in a random number generator and out pooped No Country for Old Men, which was recommended, I believe, initially by Don Juan, Sam. So thank you for that. This is a movie that Jackson had apparently wanted to watch in the first place, so it kind of paid out and meant that we didn't have to watch Velocipaster, which is doing the rounds now for some reason. That came out like early last year, I think. I remember seeing things about it, but apparently somebody just rediscovered it and made it a meme on the internet. So
is it an asylum film like Sharknado? Is it from that ilk, or is it more like a Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter?
Way more like an asylum film thing. Like, okay. They have an actual like cover that very much evokes the Sharknado feeling of it, as opposed to the Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter, which both looks homemade and like a clever homage to the era it's parodying. Something smart and clever. And not Velocipaster.
I'm glad we don't have to talk about that, and that February will be covering such illustrious films as Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh man, we got a special episode for that too. We're doing some fun stuff with that episode. I'm excited. No Country for Old Men though. Let's talk about that. I had not seen this movie before we watched it for the podcast. It was something that like I kind of had a vague interest in watching, but also wasn't like super gung-ho on. I kind of have a weird, almost innate distrust of Oscar winners. They usually feel kind of hollow and often quickly forgotten. There are some notable exceptions to it, I will say. But like for the most part, they're kind of like, woo, here's a prestige film that no one is going to remember in 4 years. So they're not things that I really set out to watch as much as other things. That said, I liked No Country for Old Men. I liked it quite a bit. I don't know that I loved it. I don't know that it's something that I'm going to, keep on repeat or necessarily even revisit. I thought it was very well done. I think it's just one of those things where it wasn't necessarily my type of movie. I liked it. I can't stress that enough. I did enjoy it, but it's not. It didn't grab me in the way that it might have grabbed the 70% white male Oscar judges.
I also had not seen this movie, and one of the reasons that I was trying to think about why this is a movie that like had come up again and again, and like why it is something that I had particularly wanted to watch, and I think I remember now in that when I first started reading a bunch of criticism. I was reading a lot of Film Crit Hulk, and he always used this as an example of a really great movie and would often talk about the ending in particular. And I remember I would always skip by because I'm like, oh, okay, like I've heard this is a really great movie. I was familiar with the author as well. The author of the original novel is Cormac McCarthy, who
a very positive man. All of his novels are very happy. There's no bleakness to any of them, right?
I mean, it's basically Cormac McCarthy is kind of like a modern day Dr. Seuss, I would say.
Yeah.
Not full of nothing but good cheer and the pain of existence. But no. So I've only read one of his books, The Road in particular, which I enjoyed quite a bit, despite not usually being super into the whole detached, like kind of bland Hemingway distant writing style, but I enjoyed it quite a bit, and had been recommended some of his other books, including No Country for Old Men, and then I heard the movie was great. So just a big confluence of things that made me want to watch this one, and overall, for the most part, I would say that while I did really like it and I thought it was really good, I was in a similar position where I was appreciating a lot of things, but wasn't super duper grabbed by it as much, until probably the last 15 to 20 minutes, where a lot of shit happens and the movie kind of plays its hand finally in terms of theme after being mostly just a kind of pulse pounding thriller. Then it did elevate itself, I'd say, to the point where I would call it great and maybe say that I loved it. Lots of good stuff going on. I told Sean that much like as he's discovered he's apparently a horror movie guy, I think I'm slowly discovering throughout my age that I'm a cowboy, apparently. Yeehaw. All I want to do is watch Westerns. Which is funny, because when I was younger, I couldn't give less of a shit about Westerns. I thought they were all the same and bland and boring. But, like, thinking about it again, like a lot of Tarantino's movies could be considered Westerns. True Grit, we rewatched that. Another Coen brothers kind of Western, and I really love that. I like that probably more than this, if that's any indication. That one I think has a stronger like emotional core, but and even stuff like Breaking Bad, like I think you could make the case that Breaking Bad is like a kind of a modernized take on a Western and plus a like crime family drama sort of thing. I'm just gonna sit on my cowpoke ranch. I guess I'm gonna move out to Wyoming and watch nothing but Westerns from now on. So howdy, partner.
I want to just kind of circle back to something you said, and this is something that like I was even looking at a bunch of other things, like reading and whatnot, about people's responses to this movie, and a lot of people were citing like, oh, it's really tense, it's really pulse pounding. There's a lot of stuff going on with it, and I will agree that there's definitely some scenes that do have some tension to it, specifically more towards the end. But like for the most part, I almost had like a detachment from it. Like it wasn't like something that I was bored while I was watching it. I was still enjoying it, but I definitely felt a distance from everything that was going on with it. I guess my question for you, since this is apparently turned into an interview, and I don't know how that happened, was like, where did you see the tension form? Like, what do you think I might have been missing? Because I don't really know. Like, I think that watching it from that detached point of view isn't necessarily a bad approach to it, because, I mean, as you said, McCarthy himself kind of writes with a detachment to his own characters. But, like, I never really saw the tension of it. I never really connected with anyone or rooted for anyone. They all felt like characters in a grand play that, like, the machinations weren't for me to see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit while I was watching the movie, actually. So another detail that I learned recently after just doing some light reading about the movie is that I didn't realize that the novel was originally written to be intended as a screenplay. I don't think Cormac McCarthy wrote this final version. I think the Coen brothers did. But, yeah, so it was always intended to be maybe a little bit more cinematic than his other books. And I think that when it comes to the tension, I think a lot of it is on a very base kind of visceral level, like in terms of like the filmmaking and the way that the action is shot and the way that like Javier Bardem kind of carries a particular menace in his performance. And I think there are parts where it's more tense than others in sort of the conventional sense, but I think there is supposed to be sort of a disconnect in terms of that tension, because I would overall describe the movie as basically just like a, Terminator, cat and mouse action thriller kind of thing. But the thing about Terminator is that, and a lot of movies like it, is that, at least in the first one, and even the second one, even if we consider the protagonist to not be Sarah Connor and we consider the protagonist to be John, the protagonists of those movies are like vulnerable people who are like very easy to root for. Like Sarah Connor in the first one is kind of a shitty job. She's like a waitress who gets like dunked on by like shitty customers, and now she's wrapped up in all this craziness. Very like every man, every woman sort of thing. And with John Connor in the second one, he's more like a kid. Again, similarly sort of vulnerable, even if Sarah herself has kind of gotten a badass upgrade. So like when it comes to tension and like in the traditional sense of wanting a protagonist to escape a bad situation, like those kind of characters are pretty easy to root for. And I think where some of the disconnect comes from, and I think that this is kind of intentional, is that our main man, Josh Brolin's character, not so easy to root for. He just kind of gets himself involved in this for really no good reason at all. Like, he just wants the money that he found.
Cash money, y'all. That's all there is to it.
He tries to join the cash money gang and pays the price for it.
Because he's got money, so you got to pay to. Yeah.
I knew you'd get it, brother.
This is our humor. We're bringing in.
We're bringing the good jokes today, but
we're Guigiing out some humor.
Oh Christ. So I think that that's a pretty purposeful dichotomy, and that you have like Josh Brolin's character, who is not especially sympathetic. He kind of treats his wife like shit, just kind of does whatever he wants, and gets himself embroiled in this for purely like monetary reasons. And it's not like, there's ever like a subplot about him like paying off the debt to the mob. Like, we see him in a trailer, like, him and his wife live in a trailer, so you could imply that financially they're not too well off, I guess. But it's not something that's like explicitly given like a super sympathetic look.
It's also never explicitly given as a motivation, even.
No, yeah. That kind of leaves it up in the air. So I think that that might be one of the things, as far as like a lack of tension that you might be feeling, is that the visual language of the film is very much like gritty, hard-boiled, shot to be like very, very down to earth and understated, which is one of the things I really liked about the action in this movie. Like, when people die, it's gruesome, but it's not like over the top, which
It's played like a fact of life, if you want to tickle the balls of theme.
Yeah, if you want to tickle the balls of the theme there. And also just this is something that I think about a lot actually. There was a Jim Sterling video of all things. I think it was way back when the Supreme Court was making that ruling about banning violent video games. And he showed the Bud Dwyer like suicide clip. If y'all the audience are familiar with that. Basically, if you're not, there was a senator like I think back in the 70s or something who killed himself with a gun on live TV, and so now you can watch it anytime on the internet. It was a big deal. So and sort of the point that Jim was trying to make throughout that video, and the reason he used that as an example is that, like, game violence is fun because it's outrageous, because, like, in Doom, you can chainsaw a demon in half and then enjoy the gibs, like, going everywhere and, like, bathe in the blood of your enemies, and that's takes the violence, similarly to Tarantino, I would say, if we're comparing it to film, to such, like, an absurd, fantastical, over-the-top level.
Just on that same vein, I just kind of want to, because I was watching some videos about this myself recently, actually. And just kind of to segue from video games back into what you're talking about, Hotline Miami actually does a really good job of kind of making those two things meet, and that it is a very much asking you the questions of, like, why are you playing video games? What are you getting out of this and everything like that? And, like, the levels themselves are just like 80s synth pop, boom, 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 like pumping music as you just walk in and, like, feel like a badass slaughtering people as you walk through. It's all top down 2D, very impersonal. Like, you're only looking at tops of heads, and then as soon as you clear the level, the music cuts out and you have to walk back through everything that you just did with only the sound of, like, a dial tone and some wind blowing through. And now everyone is on their back. Like, you can see the bodies, like, actually laying down, blood around them. And basically it forces you to walk back through everything you just did and reconcile with the carnage you just made, which combines that idea of, like, video game viscera of it's fun with, like, the reality of, like, it's not. This, if it's real, it's not fun.
Yeah, like pulling back on the choke chain a bit, like combining. That's a really good example of combining, like, that over the top and that sort of understatedness. And I guess that's, like, kind of my ultimate point about the action. Why I think it's so effective in this movie is that, like, there's some stuff that's pretty damn brutal in it, but, like, people don't explode into, like, blood bags.
It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good.
No, yeah, it's pretty hard to watch, and I think a lot of that is because, like in one scene where Josh Brolin's character, without saying too much, has to drive a car with, like, a bleeding corpse next to him, and while he's under fire, like, that dude's just dead, and, like, he's being covered in someone else's blood, and it's really, really unpleasant, but it's not like, the dude's head exploded or, something like that. It's just you have to sit there with it for a while. And I think that in terms of how the action is shot, like how the characters will, like, take cover behind cars and, like, have to patch themselves up, and, like, the long seams of them picking shrapnel out of their wounds and stuff.
That was rough.
Yeah. So the violence is really grounded in the movie, which I think is kind of the key to making it work and to sort of sell the Cormac McCarthy bleak, hopeless literary vibe. And so, yeah, so there definitely is kind of a contrast of all its own, of all these horrible things and, like, all this realistic violence happening to someone who we can't necessarily get behind very easily. And I think that might be the tension that kept you from getting, like, absorbed in it, if I had to guess.
Yeah, that tracks. I think you put it in a very solid way that I was not, like, able to reconcile with myself, because I've still been kind of processing over the past couple days since I've seen it, but, like, not really grasping on anything, which is I'm gonna use that as my segue, because that's kind of where I'm at with the movie as well. Is that like, not to spoil anything to it, but like, it's a Cormac McCarthy. If you're familiar with Cormac McCarthy, you already know what the theme of the movie is, which is everybody dies, life is meaningless, and it's all chance. Hooray! And like, there's not a lot to grapple with for me on that one. I've been really kind of struggling the past couple days to really kind of find a way to connect with the theme. And not like I don't connect with the theme. That's kind of basically my worldview, yeah. But also, like, what am I going to add to that? Like, I don't really have anything I want to say to it. It's very, it very much just is like, here's what it is. There's a final section, little statement that they make at the end that I don't want to spoil, that kind of recontextualizes some things, but not in any real capacity, I would say, to elevate it past me going like, yeah, all right, I get what you're going for. I agree with you, but like, I'm not, wowed and like shocked and left like I'm 12 and this is deep type of stuff going on. Because I'm sure this is the movie that I would have been if I was 12, 15. I would have been like, wow, this is really fucking deep. What if life has no meaning and shit? And like, I mean, life is your own meaning. Life is chance. Cormac McCarthy. I think
come watch TV.
Yeah, I think there's an own beauty in that. I think that's its own thing, its own bit of hopefulness and beauty. So like, I realize that sounds really nihilistic and shit, but I think it's a good thing in my opinion. And I don't look at that like it's a horrible thing. I'm defending my own worldview right now, mostly because it sounds bleak and I sound like a horribly depressing person.
My man Sean put himself on the podium. He put himself up for trial.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of my main problem with the movie is just that like I left going like, yeah, all right, I agree, cool. So, I didn't resonate with your tension, and I didn't, like heartily agree or heartily disagree with your themes. So I'm just kind of there with it. It was impressive. It was well made, but it was a movie.
So I have a slightly different take on the Cormac McCarthy bleakness, which I think is an important part of the movie, and I think that what made the movie enjoyable for me the most, what like sold me on it, even when I wasn't like as over the moon. I think the ending puts a nice spin on things, but for me, it was this weird paradox where like I was feeling the like physical tension for like Josh Brolin's character, but I was much more interested in the villain and Javier Bardem's character, who
is really hot. As a quick aside,
in real life, yeah, I didn't realize this about Javier Bardem because I've only seen him in this movie where he looks like a creepy psychopath, and in Skyfall where he looks like a creepy psychopath. That dude's a silver fox. That dude can get it.
Yeah.
And he's married to Penelope Cruz, so their children must be the most like beautiful Aphrodite creatures who ever existed. So I was more interested in his character. I mean, and at first it was in a very surface level way, and that I was just very much enjoying his performance and some of the scenes that he was in, and not so much for like the writing, but I think that what they ultimately do with him in the ending made the movie like come kind of full circle for me. But it's hard to say much more beyond that without spoilers.
Well, do we want to dive into spoilers? Because I feel like the ending is something that we can have a solid, rollicking discussion about. Because I obviously have thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go ahead and segue.
Well, before we do, as always, please, if you enjoy the podcast, go leave us a review on iTunes. Go tell a friend. And if you really like the podcast, patreon.com/BADHcast. Next week, we're going to be talking about BoJack Horseman. It's going to be kind of a strange episode because we're not really... It's pretty much going to be a recap of the entire series. The final few episodes are coming out the day after we record this, so we're just going to kind of shit about our feelings on the series. And we have some kind of wild experiences with BoJack Horseman from the beginning, actually. So hang around for that.
Yeah, it should be a good one. But it's been a while since we've done like a big old series like that wasn't fucking JoJo.
Yeah. So for now though, let's talk about the ending of No Country for Old Men.
So, do you want to start? Do you want me to start? How do we want to do
I'm going to let you start. Well, I'll tell you what. I will knock out what I was saying beforehand because it will take me 30 seconds to do, and then I will let you take over and we can I'll intermingle, you know? I'll interweave my narrative. I was just going to say that the ending of the movie kind of ends on a message of hope. We're talking about, we have James Lee Jones, James Earl Jones?
Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones. Wow, I just combined two very different people there, huh? So Tommy Lee Jones is recounting some dreams he had to his wife, and kind of ends with this message of like, after we die, you know, maybe there's hope for us afterwards. You know, we'll go out and see our loved ones and they'll have a warm place ready for us, and you know, it'll be nice and happy and everything like that. And I mean, it does a little to recontextualize the rest of it, but I mean, ultimately it's still, life is meaningless, you're gonna die, but hey, maybe it'll be better afterwards.
Come watch TV.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really all I had to say about it. Like, I do think it's worth mentioning that in like context of the rest of my worldview and the rest of the thematics of the film. But like, as I said, I don't really have that much more to add based on that ending.
Yeah. So Tommy Lee Jones's character is kind of weird in this movie, in that like, it feels like in another movie, and maybe a more traditional kind of Western, like he would be the protagonist. And I think that's kind of the point, because the movie opens on a monologue from him that kind of tuned me into a lot of this stuff and made me sort of pay attention throughout, is that it opens on a monologue about like, you know, I've been a sheriff for a long time, and I really always like treasured the opportunity to listen to the stories told by the old timers. My dad was a sheriff, and I was a sheriff in the town like over. We were both sheriffs at the same time. I really hope he was proud of that, because I know I sure was. And just this sort of like romanticization of this idea of like the country sheriff, or like the cowboy, or the traditional like Western kind of hero. So, but then throughout the movie, Tommy Lee Jones's character is, you know, supposedly on the case, and he cares about doing the right thing and trying to stop Javier Bardem's character and saving Josh Brolin, you know, for the sake of his like distressed wife. But at the same time, he's also very detached. Like, his deputies like, hey, you want to go like check the site for more clues again? Do you want to go like catch up on this lead? And every time he's like, fuck it, it's pointless, like it's not gonna lead anywhere. And so there's just this with his character, like, I think by doing this, what they're trying to do is sort of compare and contrast him and like Josh Brolin in terms of facing Javier Bardem's character, who is basically the Joker. Pretty much. Like, has
Monty, I'll stop you right there. This would have been a better movie than The Joker.
I meant more like Heath Ledger's Joker.
I'm well aware, but every time I get an opportunity to send a dig at that mediocre fucking slog pile of a movie, I'm gonna do it.
How about another joke, Murray? Yeah, they really build him up as like, this guy is a criminal, like a hitman, like nobody's ever seen before. Like, he's completely ruthless. He runs by his own twisted sort of code. Even if Josh Brolin gives the money back, like that's
no
not
money, no drugs. Very much Heath Ledger's Joker. Like, you cannot bribe this man.
Some men just want to watch the world burn. And so, ultimately, so I think what kind of dichotomy is created is that, like, Tommy Lee Jones, as someone who looks up to the old, like, heroes of the Old West, like the cowboys, the sheriffs, you know, the long arm of the law, justice, all that stuff, ill-equipped to handle a threat, to handle somebody like Javier Bardem's character, who cannot be bought, bullied, or reasoned with. Whereas it takes someone who's kind of unscrupulous and you know, kind of morally bankrupt in his own way, like Josh Brolin's character, to kind of fight, evil with evil, so to speak. And so there's that hopelessness is something I think that hovers around the movie for the vast majority of the runtime. And then something weird kind of happens. And it was like this moment, this like instant where things started really coming together for me in a really satisfying way. So we kind of, after a long, pretty traditional sort of like chase movie.
Actually, I'm going to jump in really quick here with something
sure.
that I think is a very good analogy. I was reading around, as I said, doing some reading on this, and somebody described this movie as like an art movie inside the Trojan horse of a chase thriller. And what you're about to get to is basically when night falls and the art movie pops out.
Yes, pretty much exactly right. Because so all throughout the movie, and by the way, art movie and the Trojan horse of blockbuster schlock is my favorite kind of movie. So I don't think it's a surprise that I've taken a liking to this. So we have like, after all the buildup, it seems like, after some battle of wits, battle of wills, some gunfights, some clever misdirections and traps on the part of our two main, hero and villain, we're gearing up for a final climactic showdown. Javier Bardem knows where the wife is. He's telling Josh Brolin, like, all right, buddy, listen up. This can go one of two ways here. You can either give me the money and I'm going to kill you, but then your wife will be safe. Or you can not give me the money and I'm still going to kill you, but then I'm going to kill your wife too. And so, that, gives him, he's mad. Oh, he's steaming, like in his hospital bed. Like he's ready to rise to the challenge and set like some Home Alone traps and have a final showdown with Javier Bardem's character. Cut to black after he arrives at the hotel. That's kind of the designated meeting spot. Cut to Tommy Lee Jones's character finding him dead on the floor. And that's it. That's the end of Josh Brolin's character. No sort of payoff, no sort of real character growth or change. Just cut to black, and our protagonist is dead.
I was very much waiting for like the twist of like, they planned it together with the sheriff, and like this is a whole trick to get back at the dude who wants him dead, and all that stuff, and just no, Josh Brolin's dead.
Yes, I thought the same thing.
On the arms of an angel.
Going gentle into that good night. So where does this leave like the last 20 minutes of the movie? Like what even can happen at this point now that we've kind of been denied our climax?
Pontification.
Yeah.
Pontification is what happens.
Basically pontification. And so Tommy Lee Jones, this is basically his ultimate failure. He went and talked with the wife. Was like, I'm gonna promise, like, I'm not gonna get him in trouble. Like, we just want to get him home safe. Like, trying to very much be like voice of reason, nice guy sheriff. And this seems to be the event that breaks him. He goes to his uncle, some sort of family member, who lives alone with a bunch of cats. He's a crazy cat lady, basically. And this is where the movie starts to take the sort of expectations of like what it's been building up for the past like hour and a half and starts to maybe say like, well, maybe that seems like the way things are, but not really. And so the uncle, when Tommy Lee Jones says like, this world, we're in like a bold new world, like a especially cruel world full of monsters like Javier Bardem. We like there's no room in it for someone like me, for someone who still like looks up to the old timers and stuff. And then Uncle Grandpa here, he starts telling him a story about
I'm sorry. I just heard Uncle Grandpa and had like a bizarre flashback to 6 years ago, Cartoon Network. And I can't let it slide. I was going to, and then like my brain was just like, no, you have to say something. I don't have anything I need to say. I couldn't let it go by without.
You need to out me, which is fair. I was hoping you wouldn't notice. So Uncle Grandpa starts telling a story, and he's like, you're another uncle of yours who was a sheriff. He was just like, hanging around his ranch, hanging around his home, and there were some criminals he was coming out that were coming after him, and they shot him right in the lung, and he was bleeding out on the floor, and his wife was sitting there like trying to keep him alive, but he knew what she didn't, and that like he was already done. There was no way to help him, and this was just a senseless execution basically. And then he says that happened in like 1906, and that I can't remember the exact line, but basically like that thinking that the world is only now just falling apart for you, that this is somehow like this terrible new world is vanity. Like that it's seeing yourself as kind of the protagonist of like an otherwise lawless world that in truth always had this horrible brutality and this senselessness and all this other stuff that isn't anything new. And until the very end, where Tommy Lee Jones is retired and just kind of having breakfast, that's kind of the last we see of him. Because with that sort of foundation kicked out from under him, that assumption that like what we're seeing is some brand new kind of evil, much like, what we might consider the Joker to be in The Dark Knight, we start following Javier Bardem's character for the last chunk of the movie. We find him going to the wife's house. She just had to bury her mother. She just had to bury her husband. Javier Bardem is there to kill her. And, they start having their little conversation. But Javier Bardem, he's got to stick to his criminal code. He's got to stick to his principles. And so because Josh Brolin didn't give up the money, even though it doesn't matter to literally anybody but him, according to his own logic, he's got to come and kill her. And so then there's a little scene, like he gives her what he considers, mercy by pulling out the coin that he used earlier on the store clerk. Really great, really more traditionally tense scene.
Yeah, that scene fucking ruled. I felt the tension in that one. I like that.
Just this like hapless fucking schmuck who has no idea the extent of like what he's dealing with. Yeah, so great scene. And he tries to pull that trick again, like call it heads or tails, like you're calling it on your life. And the wife refuses, and she's like, dude, like who are you trying to fool? Like what kind of twisted joke is this? Like that coin isn't determining shit. Like you're the one holding the gun. This is entirely in your hands. And so that, that seems to rattle him a little bit. That seems to piss him off. And hot off the heels of sort of that confrontation after he, presumably murders her. We don't actually see that, do we?
No, we do not. It literally just cuts to hit, like, she says that, and then it cuts to outside their house where she's walking out, and, like, there is an ambiguity to whether he killed her or not if it weren't for the fact that he checks his shoes, which was kind of foreshadowed earlier on in the movie. It's one of those things where if you weren't paying attention, it would be pretty easy to assume, oh, I don't know whether he killed her or not, but, like, he doesn't want blood on his shoes, and he checks.
Yeah. Okay. So then, kinda out of nowhere, he's driving away, gets absolutely yeeted at an intersection, T-boned by another car.
Somehow the most predictable thing of the movie. I saw that coming like as soon as he got in the car.
Yeah, and it's just really laid low by this. Like he's basically begging children for help. He gives $100 bill to like a 12-year-old to use his shirt as a sling so he can escape from the police. His bones like sticking out of him. He's an absolute wreck. And here's our Joker. Here's our agent of chaos. Here's our unstoppable force. reduced to giving a child money for his fucking t-shirt. And so I think with these two scenes, what I find like thematically compelling about this, coupled with Tommy Lee Jones's, confrontation about his own, perhaps kind of arrogance, is that Javier Bardem's character, who both to himself and repeated by the characters in the movie, by Woody Harrelson's character, by Tommy Lee Jones, by everyone else, is that he's this, new brand of criminal, this complete, almost like alien force of nature, and that the movie,
I would say closer to Predator, right?
I hate you.
I've been just quietly silent for like 5 minutes now, just letting you talk. You're on your soapbox telling like a really interesting thing, and I can't let that happen. I just have to occasionally step in and be like, no.
Speaking of pulling the rug out from under you, so the Predator, the Terminator, fine, not like the Alien. Are you happy now?
I am, thank you. I'm sorry, did you have momentum earlier? I also wanted to make sure that wasn't there anymore.
You've succeeded. You are the car T-voting me in the intersection.
Listen, I'm sorry. You're no Javier Bardem. All right, listen, that's just you can.
True. I can't even argue with that. But yeah, so the movie, just like it does this thing where it spends the whole like first 3/4 of the movie telling you one thing, then at the end just kind of like jerks the rug out from under you. Like, well, no, yeah, maybe he did seem like death personified, who was this really cool, like badass who like lives by his own code. But in the end, he's just another asshole with a gun. He's just another guy like embroiled in these criminal activities. He's not really special. And to a degree, like he is just as much at the whims of the universe as anybody else. And it's weird because like, so we have that with the car, but we also have like this emphasis on like he isn't bound by that. Like he does have choices that he could make, even if he claims to be like, at the whims of the cold, unfeeling arm of the cosmos. And like that sort of tension with his character at the end is something that I find really interesting, and I find that vulnerability, like introducing that vulnerability in this character, really does put the rest of kind of the pulse pounding action in a bit of a different light for me. And this is where like I find the movie to be pretty compelling, and that it is dealing very much in the Cormac McCarthy bleak, nihilistic existentialism. But it's also, I think with that though, with that sort of territory, I mean, it is like you say, I think it is ultimately a positive thing, and that it emphasizes the humanity of even this complete monster and the things that he has in common that he can't escape from, no matter how much he may like to, by presenting himself as this big bad, Joker man. And I found that really interesting and really compelling. So yeah,
Joker man sounds like a Tim and Eric sketch. I mean, I'm clearly not contributing too much to your whole thesis that you have here. I was mostly just kind of listening and taking it in, given that I didn't have nearly as much of a connection with all of it. So, I can only contribute in ways that are designed to make you lose your flow. But no, I think that you do raise some very interesting points. There's a weird... Javier Bardem's character is one that I've kind of been struggling with. As I said, I'm reading for the third time. I've been doing some reading. I keep saying this. I don't know why. It's how I segue into things. But somebody was talking about how like Javier Bardem could be the personification of death, and I think there's an element of truth to that. Even that agrees with what you were saying. Even if you want to say that he is still just a common criminal, but like, his own identification of the personification of death, where, you know, everything is up to fate. It's not him that's killing people, it's fate. This is just what their fate has in store for them. And that final car crash, even though he walks away from it, I think the fact that his arm breaks in just such a simple accident kind of goes a long way to undo a little bit of that idea of him being the entity of death in its own right.
Yeah, because and I agree. I was thinking about this when you mentioned it in our pre-discussion, that like that the him being like a personification of death definitely is, like, I think a valid reading throughout the movie, or at least the way he tries to style himself. Like, particularly, like, the great thing about that coin scene is at the very end when we leave it and, you know, he calls it correctly and Javier Bardem's like, all right, like, here you go. And he's like, don't put it in your pocket. Like, put it literally anywhere else. Put it in a drawer. Put it, you know, on the mantle. Like, do whatever you want. Just don't let it get mixed up with all the others. So, like, you know, that's obviously a message of, like, you know, treasure the fact that you've been, you know, I've deigned you with life on this day as the bringer of death, as the reaper. And even so, you know, as a front, that's something that gets cut down all the same. And I think, yeah, that's those are not incompatible sort of readings there.
It even works as its own internalized, like what he sees himself as, like more as the embodiment of death in those moments, because he is like handing that coin is basically saying, not just, you know, treasure this because this is your life, but treasure this because I am something powerful and giving it to you. I am basically a god bestowing upon you a gift. It goes beyond just like the idea of looking at this as, today I won my life in a coin flip, and this is thus my lucky coin. It goes to beyond to, as I said, I am a god. Here is a gift.
Yeah, and that's made a lot more explicit at the end with, like, I'm giving you mercy when he offers the wife the coin flip. And yeah, I think that goes along with it really well. That sort of arrogance, cutting down This movie very much likes to. Seems like it's focused on cutting down a different kind of arrogance for our three leading men. Josh Brolin gets, like, literally gunned down. Tommy Lee Jones is kind of emasculated by his own doing. You know, it's a job that he didn't necessarily have to retire from, but kind of did so out of his own arrogance of thinking that, like, he's unable to, you know, stop and unable to do his job in this, like, treacherous new world. And of course, Javier Bardem has a bone sticking out of his arm.
Yeah, he's got a bone to pick at the end of the movie, right? That was fucking nothing.
I think that was the most something that's been said in this whole 50 minutes.
Oh, man, we've been pontificating about, like, deep stuff, our own morality systems, our own identities, the identities of the movie. But you know what? Javier Bardem has a bone to pick.
Oh,
that might be the title of the episode.
Please make it the title of the episode.
Do we have anything we want to say in conclusion here? I mean, as I said, I don't have that much to say. I'm kind of deferring to you as lead on this episode for the most part.
I think I want to end it on a bone to pick. I think that's where we should leave it off.
All right. Well, I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. Find me on Twitch at Helpless_Skippy. I'm still not streaming there right now, but I might be back soon. I'm not sure yet. I'm still a lot has happened in my life over the past, like, week and a half, so we'll see what happens there. Find my writing over at 25yearslatersite.com. I also am one of the audio editors over there. So, like, go support them in that way too, because it supports me in another way.
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me on twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller. If you've got a bone to pick with me, come play Smash Bros. And fight me.
Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. It'll let you know if, like, for some reason our episode is late by a day or something like that. That's usually what that's for. If you want to get in contact with us more directly, the best way to do so would be to sign up at our Patreon at $1 a month and get access to our Discord. $5 a month gets you access to all of our backlog of bonus episodes. We got a ton of really good episodes. We got another one coming out in a couple weeks here. Stay tuned. Keep an eye on that. And at $10 a month, you get access to all of our bonus episodes, our Discord, and you get to make requests for bonus episodes. So if you want us to play like Ni no Kuni or something like that, which, yes, we will be in a couple of months. Don't worry about it, Trav.
I was going to say, what a specific example.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like, oh, actually, here's how we can explain it. Would you like to thank our $10 patrons?
I sure would like to thank our $10 patrons. Thank you so much, Julia, Mom, Aunt Summer, and Travis. You'll get your Ni no Kuni, bud. You'll get your request.
We'd also like to thank Loads of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out however you can. If you buy their albums, stream them, see them live, whatever you got to do. Support them however you want to. Also, go support 25yearslatersite.com. We got a little button on their website that'll take you to us. But while you're there, you should definitely hang out and read some of their writing. They've got just everything you could fucking think of. Writing, wrestling, reviews, news, interviews, movies, TV shows. I guarantee I'm not even listing everything. Video games and music as well. I don't think I said either of those. And more yet guaranteed. It's also Twin Peaks. I mentioned that because Twin Peaks month is coming up, and y'all, they get wild for that shit. They horny for that one.
It's a festival.
It really is. Next week, as I said, we're going to be talking about BoJack Horseman. We're going to just kind of recap the whole series in our own way, kind of talk about themes and ideas that we really pulled from it. It's a series that I rather like, despite the fact that I also kind of hate it because it fills me with dread every time I turn on an episode. So, life is meaningless.
Cormac McCarthy's a horse, apparently.
What?
Bye!
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go.